It's another beautiful day in the wilderness. I'm Ty with Thimble Axe. That's the butter bear enjoying a nice elk bone right next to me. And there's a deer over there looking at me like I'm a crazy person. In today's video, I'm going to cover some of the technical terms you've heard me using in the first two videos. We're also going to look at some of the equipment that I use and some of the tools that I use. If you still have any questions though at the end of the video, please comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I'm really looking forward to diving into that, but in the meantime, I'm just looking forward to sharing the sunset with my pup. I'll see you back at the shop. Welcome to my shop. I'm going to give you a quick tour around the place, show you some of the garbage I've got hanging up all over the walls, show you my sewing machines, some of the tools that I use on all my sewing projects. We're also going to touch briefly on my fabric choices and some of the trims that I like using. We're going to dive deeper into that topic though in future videos where I'm actually sewing stuff. That way it's a little more applicable and you'll have a better understanding of how to apply that logic to your own projects. I also want to show you this beautiful new cutting table. The last ingredient of it is supposed to arrive in a couple hours, so I'm hoping that package shows up on time so we can finish this beauty up together. And it's also been really nice outside, so I think we might try to get outdoors for a little while. Well, let's get going. Alright, I'm going to give you the quick nickel tour of my sewing shop. We're going to go into this whole wall in a little while, but I've got some pattern making stuff hanging up to the right of my cutting table. Some photos of loved ones, just some random crap that makes me happy, and this is a project I did in college. It was a branding exercise, and I actually still use this for my business card to this day. Do the clothes make the man, or does the man make the clothes? Yes. Just a fun little thing. Got my diploma, a medicinal double bit axe, just some little tchotchkes and gifts from friends. Yeah, very proud of my diploma. I'm even prouder of that honorable discharge, though. I worked my ass off to become a sergeant in the 4 years I was in the Army, and I was thrilled to be able to get that done before I got out. Up above that, I've got some of my leatherworking tools, my I Love Seam Ripping embroidery. I look at that whenever I have to seam rip something and it makes it a little more enjoyable. And then I touched on this in my last video, but it was an hour-and-a-half long video about poop bag dispensers, so most people haven't watched it. But this is the very first poop bag dispenser I ever made 12 years ago. And then I've got each subsequent iteration going down above my closet here, just to remind me that the importance of looking at my work objectively and trying to get better with every single project that I work on. That's what got me from that very first one 12 years ago to where they're at today. Speaking of progress and projects, that's the very first backpack I ever designed and sewed. I made that when I was in college, and I ended up making it way too big for what I needed it for. So it's barely ever been used. It's a nice reminder, though, of where I started. Then I went to this backpack here, which I designed around a U-lock, so I was able to commute by bike around Portland and carry all my stuff to school. That's what I used for the rest of my time in college. A couple more axes. And then, yeah, just a bunch of the things that I love to sew. Backpacks, messenger bags. A couple of reminders of my time that I spent with Red Clouds Collective in Portland. This is one of their aprons. I love this thing. Anytime I get to wear it, it reminds me of them, all the lessons I learned while I was working with them, and it also means I'm doing something messy, so that's fun. And then a shop rag from them with their motto on it: any job, big or small, do it right or not at all. Those are words they really lived by in that shop, and they instilled that in me in the 3 years I was with them. I've got some more thread cones over here, more down there, spools of thread in this little bin down here, and this little Spider-Man tackle box was a gift from a friend in the Army a few years ago for my birthday, and I keep leatherworking stuff in there. So thanks, Joe. Love you, buddy. All right, moving over here past Consuelo de Conso. I've got my fly tying corner. I really love tying flies. I really love fly fishing, and this is just one extra element of that. So I've got more sewing thread there and all my fly tying thread up here. In addition to that, I worked in the fishing industry for 2.5 years designing clothes, and a couple of the pieces that I designed ended up going on to win awards from Fly Fisherman magazine. So I've got those pages hung up next to my tying desk. Very proud of those. And this is the day I met my buddies at Fly Fish Food, the guys who inspired this YouTube channel. So they share a lot of really cool fly tying videos. That's why I tie flies and why I started this channel. So I just recently hung that photo up there. But yeah, I've got all sorts of tools and materials for tying flies. If you can believe this, I've got a lot more than what you can see here. All right, I got to move some lights out of the way so I can show you this other part of the room. So in addition to the fly tying stuff, you can see I've got my microphone there. That's what I do voiceovers for these videos with. And then I've got this shelf with a whole bunch of art supplies, some fly tying stuff on there, more thread. You can never have too much. And then, yeah, just some fun memories, gifts from people. Got that water bottle in Cambodia. I don't know why I'm still holding on to that. Maybe I should get rid of that. And yeah, I love that picture. That was I was teaching a wilderness survival class to the 3rd Battalion, 4th Air Defense Artillery Regiment back when I was in the Army. I got to teach a few wilderness survival classes, and one day somebody grabbed some pictures for me, which was really nice. So that's a great memory. Over here, I've got my snowboards, Mrs. Thimble Axe's skis, some of my store-bought backpacks. I actually buy backpacks too. I don't just make them, but those are what I use when I'm out doing really heavy-duty stuff out in the wilderness. And yeah, ironing board. I've got some ironing tools over here. My ham and my sausage. If you don't know what those are, they're extremely helpful when you're ironing apparel. And yeah, then my new tool wall that I just put together this weekend. And here's the backside of my new cutting table. You can see I've got a power strip on there. I made this second shelf here so I could store fabric rolls in it. And then underneath here, I made it big enough so I could store bins filled with fabric. And then I've got my home sewing machines over there. So you can see I really like hanging like rulers. I had my hammer on the other side. I've got some heavy-duty shears over here. So yeah, really great storage solution, and it's burly as hell. You could dance on top of this thing without any worry. So can't wait to show you that whole table and finish up the build in just a little bit here. All right, that was a tour of the shop. Now let's take a look at the sewing machines this shop was built around and the why behind each of them. All right, this is Consuelo, the Conso. This is a walking foot machine. It's a Conso 206 RB-5. This is my absolute workhorse. It's amazing for heavier duty projects like backpacks, jackets, even denim pants. And then I use my Juki DDL 8700-7. That's Julie the Juki. That's my lighter duty machine. So I use that for shirts, lighter weight pants, and that sort of thing. And I've got a whole bunch of my old sewing projects hung up on the wall behind that. In addition to the industrial sewing machines I have, I also use these 2 home sewing machines. I've got this Singer Heavy Duty 4452. This guy's been with me since I was a soldier. I used to make my own clothes in the barracks room back then, getting ready for design school. And then this Brother Serger, I actually just recently got this. A friend from my sewing group reached out to everybody in our group chat and asked if anybody had heard of any industrial sergers on the market. I wasn't really selling mine at the time, but I realized that I don't have room up here for a 3rd industrial machine, so mine was just sitting in the garage collecting dust, and I was rarely using it. So she needed a heavier duty machine so she could help her business grow. I needed a machine that would fit up here so I could use it more frequently and not freeze my butt off in the wintertime. So we both ended up winning with that trade. So I got this new Brother. She got my old Juki industrial sewing machine, Susan the Serger. Miss that girl, but she's in a good home now. I don't have a ton of time behind this Brother yet, so I can't tell you for sure whether or not I'd suggest this particular model So far it's been great, but until I have a few more hours behind it, I can't really say if I'd recommend this or not. There are a ton of great used sewing machines on the market though. I would suggest you start looking there. If you're looking for a straight stitch machine like this or a lock stitch machine, look for something that has a metal frame if you want to do heavier duty work. If it doesn't have a metal frame, the odds of it torquing while you're sewing are going to be a lot greater. I've also heard really great things about the company Sailrite. They make portable walking foot machines, which is really cool. I have a couple friends and one of my professors who swore by them. I don't have any experience with them myself though, so just like with the serger, until I have, a certain number of hours behind a machine, I won't recommend it. If anybody from Sailrite happens to see this though, I'd really love to try one of those out. They seem awesome. But yeah, until I do, I can't really recommend it for sure, but definitely put it on your list and look into some videos and that sort of thing, read some reviews, see if that might be a good fit for you. The Singer that I've got though is really nice. For a while this was my only machine, and I was able to get by with just this one machine because of the zigzag stitch on there. Now a zigzag stitch isn't going to work as well as a serger for sealing off your raw edges, but it will work. So I used to make myself canvas pants or hunting clothes and that sort of thing, and instead of serging the edges, I would just use the zigzag stitch and make sure one of the stitches was well in the fabric and the other one was going just off the edge. And that would prevent the edges of the fabric from fraying inside my garments. So when you're just starting out, you don't need to go out and buy a bunch of different machines. Just find one that has a good lock stitch function, a good buttonhole, and a zigzag stitch so you can finish off your interior seams. Well, good news. The thing I was waiting for just arrived. So let's open this up together, see what we got. This is actually the first time I've had one of these. I've had something similar in the past that I was able to make work, but this is the first time I've actually bought this specific thing, and I'm really excited about this. It's paper. No. So, this is a large self-healing cutting mat. So in the past, I've just taken like a few smaller ones, like 2 feet by 3 feet, and taped them together to have a bigger cutting area. This one is purpose built for a larger cutting space like this table. Now it's not going to take up the entire thing, which is actually by design. I wanted it to be large enough so it would cover a full width of fabric basically. But yeah, I'm thrilled with this. Gonna put some weights on it. Maybe I'll let it hang out upside down for a little while or something. Try to flatten it out a bit. But yeah, it's a huge self-healing cutting mat. It's gonna leave enough room on the sides of the table so there's still space for other stuff too, but I'm stoked about this right now. Well, this seems like as good a time as any to show you how this table was built. This is what the back half of the room looked like before Mrs. Thimble Axe told me to move the bed out and build myself a custom fabric cutting table. I figured out what dimensions I wanted to make it, then sketched it out to figure out how much lumber to get. I traded the hardware store $200 for some wood and screws, then brought it all to its new home. I actually built houses for about 3 years in my early 20s and love getting behind power tools every once in a while. Since back then though, my back got pretty messed up in a training accident in the Army, so even small jobs like this take me out of commission for a few days. But I have such a fun time making things that being laid up on a couch for a while somehow seems worth it. Building homes for my uncle's company was where I first started dialing in my eye for detail and learned the importance of taking pride in my work. He drilled into me the importance of making sure that anything I take the time to work on is something I'll be proud to put my signature on when it's finished. That's a lesson I carry with me to this day for clothes I design at work and products I make for Thimble Axe. and it's why I put my maker's mark in every bag I sew. It's my quality guarantee. The tools I'm using here are a tape measure, a speed square, a cheap old circular saw that I'll touch on in a little more detail later, a drill, an impact gun. I used a jigsaw for a couple of the cuts in the plywood, and I'm using an orbital sander to chamfer the edges of the plywood and sand the rough spots on the lumber that'll make the frame. The sanding might not be necessary, but that goes back to the pride in one's work I was just talking about. I really like the way the cutting table turned out with the sanded lumber, plus I'll be less likely to get splinters from it in the future. So a few weeks ago, Mrs. Thimble Axe sent me a surprise text while I was at work. She told me I should move the guest bed out of my sewing shop and into our TV room, so I could make myself a custom fabric cutting table. I had something like this in my shop in Washington when I was a full-time maker, and I've really missed it ever since we moved to Montana. She was inspired by the amazingly kind comments people have been leaving on these YouTube videos since I started this channel just 2 months ago. She said something along the lines of, if people are responding like this, it's clear you're doing something meaningful for the sewing community. I think we should lean in and see where it goes. So thank you to everyone who's taken time out of your day to leave a comment on one of these videos, and all the amazing people who've subscribed or shared these videos with friends. It means the world to me, and it clearly made an impact on my better half too. As you can see, I made the table's legs from 4x4s, then I made the rest of the frame with 2x4s. I tend to lean on tables a lot while I'm pattern making, and I'm a big guy, so a burly table was a must. The notches I made in the lower shelf's plywood all lined up great with the legs. The great thing about making things for yourself, whether that's with a sewing machine or power tools, is that you get to customize it to meet your needs. I made the top of this table 35 inches high, so I don't have to bend over as far to cut fabric or make patterns, which can really aggravate my back injury. The top of the table is 80 inches by 48 inches, so I can reach to the center of the table from either side. It's really starting to look like a workbench. I just need to secure the top to the frame, and it'll be ready to use. I'm spacing my screws evenly on the top sheet, since it'll be visible until I cover it with a corkboard someday, so I want it to look nice. I'm also using a countersink to make sure the heads of the screws are recessed into the plywood and not just sticking out. Then I need to add some adjustable desk lamps so I can see my work, and it's all set. And that's how I built my new cutting table. Some of you might have noticed that I use this little Ryobi circular saw to rip the plywood and cut all the boards to length. If you're a carpenter, you might be in the comment section right now making a joke about Ty playing with toys. I understand this company's got a pretty bad reputation. I bought this thing as part of a kit though in 2014 when I was a freshman in college, when it was literally all I could afford. Right after that, I built an outdoor patio set with pallet wood, used that for years. After that, used it to build a brooding box when my wife and I got chicks at our first house. A couple months later, we built a chicken coop with it. I built a fence. I've built all sorts of projects with this thing, and now this beautiful cutting table. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because I know some of you saw me going through my own sewing machines. You might be looking at your own sewing equipment now and asking, what am I supposed to do with this? Maybe you're thinking it's a toy. I'm here to tell you, it's a poor craftsman who blames their tools. Whatever sewing equipment you have, push it to its absolute limits. It's far more impressive to see somebody make something really cool with one home sewing machine, especially if it's old or cheap, than it is to see somebody make something really impressive with a warehouse full of purpose-built sewing machines. So whatever type of sewing equipment you have, figure out how to push it to its absolute limits, make the most beautiful gear you can, and please tag @ThimbleAxe in it on Instagram or Facebook. I'd love to see your work. Oh yeah, that's nice. Now, I might end up putting some double-sided duct tape under it or something like that. Probably not though, because eventually I actually want to add a layer of cork board to the top of this table, which will make it a lot better for pattern making. Sometimes when I'm making patterns, I like to be able to take a thumbtack and stick my existing pattern to the surface I'm working on, and that way I can pivot around that thumbtack, or I can just keep it perfectly in place. So eventually this tabletop will probably get a layer of either corkboard or something similar. So I probably don't want to stick anything to it with adhesive, but I think after I let this sit for a little while, these ends that are sticking up just ever so slightly still will kind of settle down. But I'm really thrilled with how this all looks right now. This is a dream come true to have a cutting table this nice with all my tools on the wall next to me. Big self-healing cutting mat that's as wide as most of the fabric that I use. This is going to really speed up some of my projects. So I'm thrilled right now. And I'm also thrilled that I got to share this finishing touch with you. All right, let's take a look at some of the tools that I use. Now, you might accumulate a collection like this or far greater than this over time, but you really don't need to start with anything like this. You just need a few simple tools to get going, and those will probably be enough to keep you going for at least your first couple years of sewing. Let's take a look at those. All right, so the tools you really need to get started in sewing are eye protection. Whatever you do, don't sit behind a sewing machine unless you've got glasses on. Something to measure with, whether that's a tape or a ruler. Something to cut your thread with. I prefer surgical scissors like these. You might prefer something like snips or just basic thread scissors. Whatever you prefer is great. Something to undo your mistakes with. A large seam ripper is going to be a lot more comfortable to use, so I would avoid these tiny little ones. They're about the same price anyway, but these are a lot easier to use. Then you need a cheap pair of scissors to cut out your patterns with, and then a nicer pair of scissors to cut out fabric with, or if you're like me, you might prefer using a rotary cutter, in which case you'll need a self-healing mat like this one, your rotary cutter, whatever variety you like, some extra blades, and I definitely suggest getting a large ruler like this if you're going to be using a rotary cutter. Then you need something to mark your fabric with. I prefer soapstone pencils. You might like tailor's chalks, whether it's the triangle ones or these little square ones. If you're just getting started, you can also just use a pencil. You don't really need to go out and buy anything special like these. Any number 2 pencil will mark your fabric. If you're sewing with waxed canvas, you might want to consider getting a scratch awl like this. With this, you can actually just scratch directly onto the fabric and you can see your marks. So that's what you really need to get started. Don't go overboard. I'm going to put a list down below of all the tools you need to get started. It's going to be less than $90. So when we were talking about sewing machines earlier, I touched briefly on the different stitch types mine make. There are a myriad of different options out there though. So let's say you have a favorite garment and there's a seam on there that you're not quite familiar with. You can go to American and Efford's website, or A&E Thread, and they've got these free PDFs you can download with different stitch types and seam types. They even have one for decorative stitches. I don't use that one, but you might love it, so check it out. But it's a completely free resource. You can see I printed mine out because I hail from the time of MapQuest. But I use these all the time when I'm dictating what type of seam needs to be used for a certain detail on a garment that I'm designing at work. I even reference them here for Thimble Axe products occasionally. So I highly recommend this free resource. Go check it out. It's a really, really cool tool. And again, it's completely free. So I just wanted to be sure you were aware of that. All right, so we're going to talk briefly now about trims. In the apparel industry, we refer to these as trims because it's what you use to trim your garments. This could range anywhere from zippers to buttons to D-rings and all sorts of other things like that. So I'm going to start with the D-rings. D-rings come in a variety of different colors, materials. I would start by figuring out what the overall aesthetic you're going for is. If you want lightweight, modern, you might want to go with a polymer or plastic for this sort of thing. If you want a more classic look like I use, then you probably want to stick with metal. And then figure out what color you want and use that across the board. So me, I really like nickel-plated stuff. So you notice my snaps, grommets, everything here, other than these buttons, are nickel-plated. So since I like nickel-plated, I went with nickel-plated D-rings. These are from Tandy Leather. It's a nice heavy duty wire, but it's not too thick where they're just super heavy. So that's a great choice. You can also get those from buckleguide.com or through Wall Wax Sewing, which I mentioned earlier. All three of those are really great references and resources if you want to buy the stuff or if you just want to see what's out there. But I bought these ones from Tandy. Then right here, I've got ladder locks. Now ladder locks are what I use to adjust the straps on a backpack. It's a really handy tool. There aren't a ton of uses out there for them, but when you need a ladder lock, nothing else will do. So I use nice metal ladder locks. Right next to that, we've got a shank, which is kind of a type of button. It's what you'd see on jeans or a jacket in some cases. It's essentially a button that you don't have to sew on. Next to that, I have buttons. I love a good standard button for when I'm making a shirt. Buttons, shanks, snaps, they're all measured in what's known as line, which is L-I-G-N-E. It's a French word, and there are line to millimeter or line to inch conversion charts all over the internet. So if you're trying to shop for buttons, shanks, snaps, or anything like that, and everything is like 24L or 18L, that's the line size. So if you want to know exactly what size that is, just look up a line conversion chart and that'll show you. All right, next to my buttons, I've got rivets. Now I rivet everything. There are very few products that I work on that don't have rivets in them, and I love a double capped rivet. There are a few different types of rivets out there. I would definitely check out Tandy Leather or go to montanaleathercompany.com or whatever the website is for Montana Leather Company. They have a ton of different options there. There might be some in Wall Wax too. There are all sorts of different options out there though for these. Figure out what you like the aesthetic of best and go with that. And next to that is grommets. I don't use grommets on a ton of projects, but it is a really helpful tool to know about. I use them for drain holes in water bottle holsters on some things. I use them for cords to pass through on other projects. Yeah, it's a really good one to have in your tool bag, but you don't need them on every project. Next to that, I've got snaps. Now, I use what's known as a ring snap. That's because it has this ring closure on the inside of that. That's the female section of the snap. And some people prefer what's known as spring snaps. Other people really love prong snaps. So if you want to make Western shirts, you probably want to look at prong snaps. But I like ring snaps. They're really strong. I don't have any failures with them. The only time I've ever had any issues with them is when they've pulled through fabric. So sometimes you want to back those up with a washer, either made out of canvas or leather. We've touched on that in other videos, and I'm sure we'll talk about those more in the future. But yeah, I have really great luck with ring snaps, so that's what I personally use. But figure out what works best for you and go with that. Another trim I use is roller buckles. I use a lot of 3/4 inch nickel-plated roller buckles, so they go with all the other trims I use, but there are tons of different types and sizes of these, so figure out what you like best. All right, we're going to talk briefly about measuring tools now. Now, most of you are familiar with a tape measure like this. Some of you might not realize, though, that this is a wear item. These wear out over time, especially if you're using it a lot. So when I get a new one, I write the date on the end with a Sharpie like this, and then I make sure to replace it within a year of that date. If you ever notice that it's starting to get crinkly along the edges, kind of like a piece of bacon, it means it's time to replace it. Once you start seeing that, you're no longer getting accurate measurements, get a new one. In addition to it being a really helpful measuring tool, you can pop it over your neck like that and wear it around like a real cool guy. So I swear by these, but a tool that I use a lot more frequently is just a see-through ruler like this. This one's 2 by 18 inches. They're really flexible, and this is a really, really handy tool if you're making patterns or if you're just cutting stuff out. I keep a few of these around the house, probably 10 of them actually. Different colors, so they show up on different fabrics better. I've got 10-inch ones, 18-inch ones, 24-inch. I swear by these. It's one of my go-to measuring tools, I'd say more so than anything else. Another one I use frequently is this large one right here. This one's going to be a little stiffer. It's a little bit thicker, and that's because this is meant to be a straight edge for cutting along with a rotary blade. So you put this on top of whatever you're trying to cut, and you can guide your rotary blade up the edge of that, and it's perfectly straight cut every time. These are also really handy though if you're making patterns. I use this all the time if I'm making backpack patterns, messenger bags, even clothing. I swear by this. If you were going to choose one or the other, I'd probably start with the smaller one though, unless you're using a rotary cutter for a lot of stuff, in which case I would definitely get one of these. I'll put a link to both of those down below though. If you're patterning your own clothing, you want something like this shoulder curve or this hip curve. These come in really handy. If you're not making your own patterns though, I would definitely skip these to start. I use the hip curve though all the time. I actually use this to put the padding in my backpack straps. So you're gonna see this very tool a lot on this channel. All I did to make it safe for putting stuff into the backpack straps was I rounded over the corners by dragging it back and forth on some cement for a few minutes, so they're not pointy and they won't tear through my fabric. But I use this thing all the time, whether I'm patterning clothes or just making backpacks. So if you want a straight edge, but you don't want to use a plastic tool like that, I totally get that. Not everybody likes using plastic. They make really great metal rulers as well, and they'll last a lifetime if you treat them well. If you let them get bent, then they're garbage. But as long as you treat them well, keep them somewhere safe, they will last you a lifetime. This one has cork on the back of it, so when you put it down on a project, it doesn't slip around. It's a really nice feature. In addition to that, I've got this square here. You might be saying, Ty, that's an L, not a square. Good eye, I'm proud of you. These are great though for getting a perfectly right angle on projects. So when I'm pattern making, if I want to make sure I'm getting a perfectly right angle, say at the top of a backpack or something like that, this is the tool I use for that. You can also use a tool like this. That's going to be a perfectly right angle every time as well. It just only extends over a few inches, whereas this one extends over quite a bit further. So if you're working on larger pieces, one of these can be great. You can buy these from fabric stores, or you can even buy them in much larger sizes from hardware stores. On that same note, it's really helpful to have a really long straight edge. Now, it doesn't need to be a ruler like this one. It could just be a long straight piece of metal, so you can draw perfectly straight, long lines. This one's 48 inches. I use it all the time. Ideally, I wish I had a 60-inch one though. The 48 is just a little bit short for a lot of the things I'm doing. Like if I'm trying to cut the bottom of, say, a roll of fabric, if I want it to be perfectly straight all the way across, then I use this. Rolls of fabric are generally 60 inches or 62 inches. So I have to mark the first half of it, and then I move it over, make sure it's still on the line, and then finish my mark. So if I had a longer one, it would save me that step, but this one is great and it gets used all the time. All you really need though is just some sort of straight edge like this. All right, if I forgot any measuring tools that you swear by, comment down below and let me know where I messed up. Now we're going to talk about fabric, thread, and needles. And the reason we're talking about those all three together is because they're connected. After you choose the right fabric for a project, you need to feel the weight of it and figure out what type of thread, what weight of thread is going to be appropriate. Now thread, generally the higher the number, the thicker the thread. So if you're looking at Tex 27, it's going to be really thin, dainty. If you're looking at Tex 90 or thicker, it's going to be burly. On top of that though, there are different types of thread. So some of them are made up of really short staples of like polyester or cotton. Those are going to be a lot more pliable than something like this bonded nylon. That's going to be really stiff, really abrasion resistant though. So there are different uses for every type of thread out there, just like every type of fabric, and you need to choose a needle accordingly for each project. So if you're working with something really heavy duty, I'll tell you exactly what I use. For my messenger bags, I use an 8-ounce leather, 8 or 9-ounce leather. Then I use number 10 waxed canvas, and I use a number 10 duck canvas liner. So these are all really heavy duty fabrics, and in order to sew through those without breaking a bunch of needles, I use number 20 needles from Gross Beckert, and I use those in my walking foot machine. And then I use a Tex 90 bonded nylon thread with a UV resistant coating. That way it doesn't fade in the sun. But if I wanted to make a dress shirt, I could not use that needle and that thread combo. The seams would pucker like crazy. It just wouldn't work. So if I was making a dress shirt, I would want to use, say, a Tex 40 with a size 14 or 16 needle. My point is, it's going to really vary project to project. I would suggest figuring out a needle manufacturer that you like that makes needles for your machine. Either Oregon Needle or Gross Beckert are a great place to start. Go to their website. They'll have charts there that tell you every needle they make and what types of projects they're appropriate for. Same goes for thread. Check out A&E thread or Coates & Clark. Go to their website, find their charts, or look at each individual thread that they make and figure out what they recommend it for. I wish there was a blanket answer I could give you that would get you through every sewing project in the future. Like, yeah, buy size 16 needles and text 60 thread. That's just not the case. It's going to vary from project to project. So figure out what you want to sew and then figure out the thread and the needles from there. Wish I could give you a better answer, but that's the truth. All right, if you've seen my previous videos, you've seen me use my makeshift anvil. I'm going to show you how to make one of those right now. All you need is a couple cinder blocks. If you're taller than like 5'10", you probably want to use 3 cinder blocks for this. A piece of 6 by 6 inch steel, 3/8 of an inch or thicker, and then some double-sided duct tape. All right, so that took about 2.5 minutes to put together. Honestly, the hardest part was getting the back side off the double-sided duct tape. This thing's gonna be ready to rock for years to come. All right, well, I've had enough fun inside for now. This bag did a lot of modeling for me earlier in the episode when we were talking about trims, so I think I'm gonna load this up with my favorite fishing gear and hit the creek. I'll see you out there. cutthroat trout. Let's get him back. I hope you enjoyed talking shop with me today. If you still have any questions about any of the topics we covered, please comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I'm really glad though that we ended this video with some fishing in the great outdoors and using some thimble and axe gear. Speaking of, the summer's really been getting away from me and it's going to be winter before I know it, so I think the next video is going to be more axe than thimble. But don't worry, we'll still incorporate some sewing stuff into it, and maybe I'll try to do an overnight with a friend who also works in the apparel industry. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already, and huge thank you to everybody who's been subscribing and leaving such amazing comments and sharing the videos. It means the world to me. Thank you so much. So until next time, get outside, enjoy the beautiful weather while it's here, spend time with your loved ones, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then, I love you. All right, I think we're done now.